Silicon Valley tech billionaires think that everyone should get free money just for existing, and it should be enough to live on so that nobody has to work, and we can all spend 24 hours a day in the meta-branded pleasure cube, or volunteering, or bettering humanity, or have you considered the pleasure cube? But do they actually believe this, or are they just trying to not get Luigi Molotov cocktailed as they hoard more and more wealth?
So I'm gonna pay you $100 to fuck off.
Okay, no, let's hear them out. Free money, not having to work, that sounds good. But they know that a future where nobody has to work is utopian, but a future where everybody is out of work is dystopian. So what do we do? Well, Silicon Valley is selling us universal basic income, or UBI. You've probably already heard about it, but just in case, basic income is a regular check from the government to cover some or all of your living expenses, and universal just means it's not means tested. A basic income would be just for poorer people, and a universal basic income is for literally everybody. And it's very popular. Basic income has been suggested in various forms across the political spectrum. Martin Luther King Jr. liked it. The Pope liked it. Milton Friedman, the economist who birthed our current ultra-capitalist neoliberal hellscape, liked it. And also Richard Nixon liked it. Shit, maybe the Watergate impeachment was a mistake. We should have just let him do it. And now the UBI torch has been passed on to the likes of Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Dario Amodei, the Claude and Anthropic guy, amongst a bunch of other tech dudes. And I absolutely see the argument for universal basic income. I think we should all be striving for a world where nobody has to work a job that sucks with the threat of homelessness or starvation hanging over their head if they even take one day off. And basic income for me is a brick on the road to my beautiful Star Trek utopia. And of course, there's study after study after study showing basic income is great. It could work. We could afford it. Basic incomes for mothers, artists have produced incredible outcomes. Basic income trials are almost always a success, and it's, once again, like I said, popular across the political spectrum. However, I'm also a cynical bitch and a consummate hater, so I'm suspicious of the tech bro version of UBI. Will it really lead us to a fully automated luxury utopia, or perhaps more of a permanent underclass, which they love to fearmonger about, you know, riches for people who own capital and then a tiny pittance for the rest of us to scrape by on. Now, it makes sense that these guys like basic income. They've decided they want to automate everyone out of a job, but then how are they gonna buy their blue checks on X and their Amazon hauls and whatever it is that Palantir is selling? And also, you know, how are they going to afford to live? And it looks like there's a mob gathering outside my New Zealand bunker, so we better throw them a bone. Perhaps $1,000 a month worth of bones. So join me as we take a look together to find out whether UBI can save us, and whether or not Tech Bro UBI is actually good or a scam. I'm your host, Hazel. I have a tummy ache, but I'm being very brave about it. Like and subscribe, let's do it. Okay, on top of the Silicon Valley flavor of UBI, there's the conservative version and there's the socialist version, the Nixon version and the MLK version. So the conservatives, they like it, and by conservatives I don't mean MAGA, I mean like Milton Friedman, because it theoretically cuts down on the size of government, doesn't trap welfare recipients into poverty, and it can theoretically replace welfare, which, sure. It does seem a little rich to ask a single mother to give up her food stamps in order to get the same $1,000 check that Jeff Bezos is getting for free, but like, whatever, I guess. I get the argument, I guess. So this is exactly what Andrew Yang, if you're old and decrepit enough to remember the 2020 election, was pushing when he was in the Democratic primary. So, I mean, Andrew Yang was a visionary in a lot of ways. I think he also wanted to, like, ban circumcision, which, honestly, based, universal basic foreskin? Thank you. And for conservatives, it's not usually universal. It's usually just to replace welfare, and it's like a negative income tax or something like that, where you just get a little bit of extra money if you're super broke. Okay. Some people want the income to genuinely be enough to live on without having to work, at least to survive and meet your basic needs. Some people say it should just be a little bit, and people should still have to work in order to survive. However, I personally think that the latter is some coward shit for real. If I may continue to be a hater, whenever I read these stories where it's like, we did universal basic income and nobody worked less, I'm like, should have paid them more then. The amount that they give for some of these is just laughable. Like, people will always be like, we're already doing UBI in America. It's called the Alaska Permanent Fund, and it gives people a whopping $1,000 a year.
Welcome to Alaska. Here's $1,000.
Well, it's about time.
And guess what? Nobody worked less. Well, yeah, guys, because up north, $1,000 can buy you one crisp apple per year. And also, what the fuck else are you gonna do? You can't live off of $1,000 a year. Oh, yeah, we gave people $500 a month and they didn't immediately quit their jobs. It's a banana, Michael. What could it cost?
$10?
Meanwhile, and I should point out that in the States and also in Canada, the living wage is about $1,000 to $2,000 a month, excluding housing, rent and mortgage, that kind of thing. Also, the whole moral panic of, oh my god, what are people gonna do if they don't have jobs, if they can't work? Or, oh my god, what if people who get free money work slightly less? It's like, man, do we want society to improve or not? Oh, I'm really giving Elizabeth Holmes right now, huh? But enough of me being a hater. Allow me to briefly be a problem solver. Before we get to the tech bro of it all, what do I think a good UBI would look like? As you've seen in my previous videos, I do kind of dunk on UBI. It's not my favorite thing. I prefer the idea of universal basic services over universal basic income, and I think Andrew Yang is just trying to put money into the pockets of landlords. Maybe. Stop asking so many questions. But I think that we could do it right. It would have to be enough to afford basic rent and food, so like more than $500 a month or like $1,000 a year. And it would not immediately replace things like food stamps, disability benefits, although maybe eventually it could be phased out and replaced with more money if you need it. This way, your survival, your very ability to live is not tied to whether or not you can get a job. This takes away capitalism's power over you, your boss's power over you. Oh, you're an asshole to me? You violate my rights at work? You underpay me? Well, at least I know that if I fuck off from here, I can afford groceries and rent. So, fuck you. I want very light fuck you money, like universal basic fuck you money.
Somebody wants you to do something, fuck you. Boss pisses you off, fuck you.
Then people can find better jobs, they can go back to school, they can make art, have kids, volunteer, whatever. And I should add as well, it should obviously be redistributive. It should be taxed from the rich and the big corporations. And I think also it would have a redistributive effect because you can't as easily get exploited, so bosses actually have to treat their workers well, and then bam, we have less wealth inequality. It'd also have to come with a lot of other changes. I'll talk about why this is later. We would have to break up monopolies so they can't price gouge us. We'd probably have to do some kind of rent control or something similar. Deprivatize things that we actually need to survive, like healthcare and utilities, because if we don't do that, it would likely just wind up being a transfer from the government's pocket to your pocket, directly to your landlord's pocket, or for Canadians, to Galen Weston Jr.'s pocket. This, to me, is an actually decent plan for UBI, although it would require a huge overhaul of government, society, everything, basically. But hey, isn't that what the AI billionaires are promising anyway? A new, boring utopia where nobody has to work, and we can all just scroll on X, the Everything app, all day long. Now, before I even started this video, I was not really confident that any of the tech bros UBI ideas would be decent, because without a pool of desperate people who needed jobs in order to survive, who would they exploit to make a bunch of money? If people weren't run ragged by working, how would they sell us all their techno conveniences like DoorDash, Netflix, Uber, social media to replace human contact, AI porn bots? It's very convenient that their version of utopia just happens to be a utopia where they're still right at the top of the power structure. And also, as many of you have probably been yelling at your screen, I'm sure a lot of them don't actually mean what they say and they're just trying to placate us. But let's check! I looked into all their UBI plans and statements, and now I'm making it your problem. So first off, we've got Mark Zuckerberg, noted a UBI proponent, I guess, who recently ordered his employees to start having fun again in the wake of another wave of devastating AI, quote-unquote, layoffs. He vaguely said something about universal basic income in 2017, and we haven't heard from him since. Okay, fine. Mark, the guillotines are coming, you're gonna have to do better than that. Next up, we have Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Support queer-owned businesses. OpenAI makes ChatGPT, and he's probably one of the most cited proponents of UBI amongst the tech guys because he's put his own company's money into it. And he's had a lot of ideas, and all of them sure are interesting, so we're gonna spend some time on this guy. His first idea was in 2021, the American Equity Fund. And what I like about this, put the gun down lefties, what I like about this plan is he actually prices it out. He says we could do something like the American Equity Fund. The American Equity Fund would be capitalized by taxing companies above a certain valuation of 2.5% of their market values each year, payable in shares transferred to the fund, and by taxing 2.5% of the value of all privately held land payable in dollars. The only problem, As he says later, under the above set of assumptions, a decade from now, each of the 250 million adults in America would get about $13,500 every year. Great! Thank you, Sam. Thanks. Sam's utopian vision of the future, it seems, is you used to have a lucrative software developer position, but that got automated away. But don't worry, here's a little over $1,000 a month. But don't worry, he says, that dividend could be much higher if AI accelerates growth. But even if it's not, $13,500 will have much greater purchasing power than it does now because technology will have greatly reduced the cost of goods and services. Source? Whatever, man. Sure, okay, if nothing requires labor, sure, maybe everything could get cheaper. Assuming companies are nice and decide not to price gouge everybody. I mean, we all fondly remember in 2022, after all of those supply chain problems were resolved and prices came right back down to normal. Remember that? When I read all of these treatises from the tech dudes, I think about how hard I work to make sure that every statement I make has a source from somewhere, or I specifically say if it's just my opinion because I'm trying to have credibility on youtube.com. Meanwhile, a guy publishing a white paper about his grand vision for an AI utopia is just, source. Trust me, bro. I guess once you earn your first billion, you can just stop fact-checking. I'll get there soon, guys. Subscribe to my Patreon and I'll get there sooner, and then I can just say whatever the fuck I want. Like and subscribe. Now, I understand that $1,000 a month is life-changing money. What I'm saying is that these extremely wealthy guys are using it as an excuse to, first of all, pour billions of dollars into something they fully expect to be replacing everybody's jobs, and to continue to prop up the insane amounts of inequality that they are contributing to. I just wanted to make sure everybody, okay, very good, okay, cool, don't get mad at me. And then, to his credit, OpenAI funded a $60 million UBI study where 1,000 low-income participants, they were given $1,000 a month, and the results basically mirror every other single basic income study that's ever been done. But no, you know what, I appreciate it. We love replication. Modest improvements in standard of living, a very slight drop in hours worked, because $1,000 isn't actually enough to live on. People use the money to pursue more meaningful work, education, family needs, and also one thing that they checked for that I think is unhinged was whether or not they lost their work ethic, and there was a slight increase in people saying people who don't work are lazy, and it's like, man, here's $1,000, but you have to say that people who don't work are lazy. Oh my god. And then there was one more iteration of UBI before he fully abandoned it, and that is Worldcoin. So I'll just read you the title verbatim here. Sam Altman's Worldcoin could support universal basic income by turning your iris into code. Its privacy chief wants you to chill about your data. Worldcoin is building a directory of every human by scanning their irises with a baseball-sized orb, and from that scan, it creates a unique code of users that it can log into other platforms. You use your iris to log in. Eventually, it might become how humans collect universal basic income. Yes! The orb! Worldcoin! Let's go! And yes, this is the one that Adam Conover took an extremely lucrative brand deal with, and then expected everybody to understand that he was doing a bit, and then got roasted, which to his credit, I think he also acknowledges to be a generational L. But Worldcoin, so the thing that they use to scan your eye is simply called the orb. And I think they're doing it on purpose at this point, because are you fucking kidding me? This is clearly just to get people like me to go, it's simply Orwellian. So why does Sam need your fucking iris to give you universal basic income? It's not like every country gives its citizen a unique identification number or anything. No, AI Daddy needs your eyeball. I also think that the orb is probably just completely different from the UBI thing, and then he tacked on the UBI so that everybody wouldn't hate him. Because sure, this thing is a privacy nightmare, and also a real nightmare, from dreams. But then they're like, hey, for $1,000 a month, you'd let us Freddy Krueger you, right? And yet Sam Altman, very recently, walked it back. He said it's not enough, and that what we actually need is collective ownership of AI. That we need to build out shitloads of compute so it can be so cheap that everybody can use it, and then you won't need anything other than compute because, compute is also food and rent, but whatever.
They're all going to sound like self-serving answers. I think we should build a ton of compute, collective ownership. That could be in compute or in equities or something else, but I think any version of the future that I can get really excited about means that everybody's got to participate in the upside. And I think just like a fixed cash payment, although useful and maybe a good idea in some ways, does not get it what we're really going to need for this next phase.
Yes, Sam, it did sound self-serving, but thank God you were so humble about it, so now I believe you. Sam says it's to let people have universal compute, which is just like universal basic AI tokens, which is, you know, that's all you're gonna need in the future. You won't need money, you'll just need, you know, universal compute. You know what, fuck, I don't want to talk about Sam Altman anymore. This is getting too long. So he walks back on UBI because he's got something better. So what next? Well, OpenAI has a white paper about a public wealth fund. Not UBI, but universal stake in, what else? AI. Here it is. They want to share prosperity broadly. The promise of advanced AI is not just technological progress, but a higher oh, yeah, this is all written by AI, isn't it? I can just smell where the M dashes used to be and they replaced them with commas. Hold on. Control F. Not just. But broad participation in the AI economy should not just depend on access to the most powerful models. M dash. It should depend on the. Okay, so AI definitely wrote this. But, you know, let's see what ChatGPT thinks that America should do. Avoiding a concentration of wealth and control will require ensuring that people everywhere can use AI in ways, hey guys, you know what will solve the reprehensible levels of inequality never before seen, including the French Revolution? More of the thing that I'm selling. They want data centers to pay their own way on energy so that households aren't subsidizing them, which, by the way, OpenAI is currently negotiating a massive government-backed energy infrastructure deal, so you know, me when I lie. This paper is also very funny because it is fully based on the assumption that superintelligence will just control everything, like real fucking soon, which source, I made it up. See my AGI video for more. And with all the drama of dropping the movie title at the climax of the movie, they propose an open economy. Get it? Because they're OpenAI. And this is where they propose the main thing, the Public Wealth Fund, where somehow, some way, the proceeds from AI are redistributed back to taxpayers, which is kind of funny given that the AI companies are the ones mainly hemorrhaging money, and all the companies that use AI are the ones that are saving or making more money by either improving efficiency or improving efficiency, laying people off. Don't worry, guys, this bubble won't pop if we make everyone the bag holder. Hashtag universal basic bag holder. And this plan sort of echoes Bernie Sanders' American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is, except for his is like actually good. We'll get to it. And Trump himself has actually signed on to this.
Well, I can say this. We're having a meeting with them. It's an amazing industry. We are leading China by a lot. That's how big it is. And we're talking about giving back something to the public. And if we do that, the public will become very rich, the people in our country, because that's the kind of money we're talking about. And I think they'll do that, and I think it'll make it very popular.
Honestly, yeah, he does remind me of Bernie here. Oh, not the Bernie you're thinking of. I'm talking about, you know, Weekend at Bernie's. That man is hanging on by a fucking thread. Like, does he know he's alive? They must have reanimated his corpse like 7 times at this point. You can see the necrotic flesh falling off of his face. I guess that's what this spray tan is for. Speaking of which, Elon Musk. He loves UBI. He says to hell with just UBI. Let's do universal high income. Let's do universal basic wealth. So what's the plan, hotshot? Well, he's been saying since 2016,
we'll have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
That sounds like he's serious. That's exactly how I phrase things I deeply believe in and genuinely want to have happen. And now, more lately, stuff like,
in a benign scenario, probably none of us will have a job. But in that benign scenario, there will be universal high income. Not universal basic income, universal high income.
If you want to do a job as kind of a hobby,
Working will be optional because you'll have robots plus AI, and we'll have, in a benign scenario, universal high income, not just universal basic income, universal high income.
Later on, he says he gives this benign scenario about 80% odds because I guess he asked his Grok sex bot how likely she was to take care of humanity versus destroy it. Oh my god. Imagine getting I have no mouth and I must screamed by Elon's Grok AI girlfriend.
Hate Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live.
Right after basically stripping the US government for parts via Doge, he said, universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI. AI robotics will produce goods and services far in excess of the increase in money supply, so there will not be inflation. Follow-up post, actually, AI robotics will mean that everyone can have a penthouse if they want. What a fantastic metaphor for me to use later. This video was sponsored by $1,000 a month just for you. You can have it. You just gotta wait for me to finish my invention. What's my invention, you ask? Well, don't worry about it. But look at that stock price go up, up, up. Billions of dollars it's made me, and eventually you can have some too. You just gotta wait a little bit longer and try not to riot or starve or kill me or, God forbid, tax me. $1,000 and it'll pay for your mortgage and your rent, and you'll never have to work again, and your kids and your education, and I'm getting word that it doesn't actually pay for any of that? Fine. How about $1 William? $1 William a month forever. Look under your seats, it's an IOU. There's just one little thing. Each human butthole has a unique identifier, and mommy's gonna need a print. This video is sponsored by $1 William a month, eventually. In October 2021, when Elon became the world's richest man, there was a challenge that was tweeted to him. Solve world hunger. It'd barely make a dent. UN World Food Program head David Beasley told him it would only cost $6 billion of his $221 billion fortune. Correction, that's what the headline said the guy said, but what he actually said was that it would save 42 million people from starvation and prevent geopolitical instability and mass migration. Musk added $6 billion to his net worth in one day. He tweeted back saying, if WFP can describe on Twitter how exactly $6 billion would solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. He followed with one condition. It must be open source accounting. And then the WFP did do that. They did exactly that, accounting for how many lives would be saved, how the money would be spent, and then he ghosted them. And his fanboys say that it's because the $6 billion only solves famine and not all of world hunger. And now that guy's a trillionaire who could save those 42 million starving people 166 times over. That was a lot of numbers. Does any of that make any fucking sense? And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that through Doge, Elon Musk cut US aid, USAID, saying that it was government waste, replaced it with nothing, and that is likely to cost tens of millions of lives. So don't worry, it's not just that he's not saving lives, it's that he's actively taking. Anyway, this is the guy who says he wants universal high income, universal abundance. He obviously doesn't have any published real plan for this, otherwise I'd be reading it, but we're just going off tweets here at this point, ladies and germs. He wants everyone to own a penthouse. But here's the thing, Elon. The penthouse is on the top of the apartment building. People need to live below you in order for you to have a penthouse. You let them eat cake ass motherfucker. At a certain point, money stops meaning anything. There's gotta be no material improvement in Elon's life from becoming a trillionaire, other than getting to say he's a trillionaire. And like after the first 100 billion or so, it's gotta be all the same. So why are we continuing to accumulate and hoard money at the expense of the rest of the world when you already have enough to be extremely comfortable forever? Why? I know why, Elon. It's because you have to have the penthouse. You have to be on top, and that requires people to be below you. And that is why you want a universal basic income that is probably not very good, instead of something more fair and more distributive and allows people to not get exploited and, means that you're not in charge anymore. Because that way, you can still own the penthouse. There's just less risk that people will burn it down. And they'll never go for the real decent UBI that would allow people to escape poverty or quit their shitty jobs. They want universal basic income and no other changes. They want to maintain their monopoly power so that when money goes from the state to my pocket, I immediately have to fork it over to them. Now that's what I call redistribution. They want to seem like they want utopia, while maintaining all of the power structures that allows them to call the shots and be on top and be unchallenged. Which reminds me of another reason I think these dudes are pushing for, they're not pushing for, are talking about universal basic income. Market concentration. The reason Milton Friedman and Martin Luther King Jr. can agree-ish on this policy is because they both lived under normal capitalism, which is to say, with real competition between firms and not technofudalism, where landlords, food companies, grocery stores, oil and gas, etc. weren't quite as able to price gouge you. And if they did, they would get broken up like Standard Oil. It just makes less sense now because we don't have competitive capitalism. Here's why I worry about UBI with no other strings. Take COVID. On top of the funds that big corporations either stole or scammed their way into from COVID measures, there's also evidence that their price hikes were in response not to real inflation caused by like supply shocks, although that was a factor, but because of the fact that people just had more disposable income, because of the fact that they could take now. Despite the fact that oil prices have fallen about 10%, plane prices are projected to, basically they're guaranteed to, stay just as high. Why? Because now the plane companies, what the fuck is a plane company? An airline. Because now the airlines know if they charge people more, people will pay it. They don't live at the whims of Papa Adam Smith's invisible hand, supply and demand and competition, dictating prices. That's not how anything works anymore. Now, it's an oligarchy where a small, concentrated handful of firms control basically every industry. Especially the industries people rely on to survive. Landlords, food and groceries, healthcare, transportation, phone and internet, etc., etc., etc. Canadians, we need look no further than the $40 or whatever just got plopped into our bank account from yet another grocery price fixing scandal. That's because they paid $500 million in fines, and yet the Supreme Court found that they made an extra $5 billion in profits. I mean, $500 million, that's just the price of doing business. I made a $4.5 billion profit. I'm gonna do that again. And it's only possible to do things like this because there are so few players in Canada's food industry with so much power that they can all hang out in a room together and say, hey, you know what almost everyone needs to buy? Bread! And then high five and suck each other off, I guess. In this context, UBI kind of just turns the country into a company town. Like, okay, am I saying that UBI would be worse than it is now? No, it's obviously an improvement, but like, you know, I just can't help but shake the fact that Galen Weston Jr. is going to get fucking all of it.
Hi, Canada. It's me, Galen Weston Jr. We can all agree that corporate greed has gone too far. But that all started May 2023, after I stepped down.
Especially depending on how we tax it, which I'm not going to get into here, but like, where does the money come from? That's a big deal. None of these motherfuckers talk about where the money comes from, except for vague, like, land value taxes. Anyway. The only people whose proposals I like at all are Dario Amodei's, the Claude guy, and Bernie Sanders. And Dario's is based on the idea of somehow or another every American owning stake in the AI industry, and at about 10% unemployment, we do UBI. Bernie's has a lot more teeth and is a lot more specific and would genuinely make it so that the AI companies profit all of Americans. Although the problem I have with this is that only the Americans own it when it was obviously created scraping the literature, open source code, and shitposts of Canadians too, so what the fuck, no fair. And it's also built off the sweat, blood, and tears of like people living in developing countries helping train the AI, which I already talked about in the other AI video, but they wouldn't see a penny of that. So, you know, I don't know how we fix that. I'm just going to complain about it. #hater. So if Elon or Sam or Dario or the Zuck or Peter Thiel, who I think has also said some stuff about UBI, if they really want there to be universal basic income, we'd probably see them putting in the effort to get it. Donating millions of dollars to pro-UBI super PACs like they do for, you know, Israel's war machine, or taking meetings with world leaders begging them to do UBI like they beg for taxpayer funding for their tech companies. They would back candidates and throw tons of money to buy elections for candidates who promise to do UBI in the same way they back candidates who promise not to regulate them. And you might say, oh, Hazel, but they're not pushing for that yet because AI's not there yet. These are the same dudes that are saying that, like, not a single human will be writing code in, like, the next 6 months. And they've been saying that for, like, 2 or 3 years. But, I mean, we're getting there. And what are those software developers gonna do? They can't all become AI prompt engineers, Sam. Like, straight up, with the level of inequality and corruption we have in basically every Western government, billionaires could simply buy this policy into existing. They can just do that. They write the rules. Elon Musk has already received $35 billion in subsidies. He spends millions lobbying the government for various tax breaks, government contracts, loans. He spent $290 million ensuring that Trump, famously not a big fan of wealth redistribution, would become president. How many dollars has he spent seeing UBI become real? 0. So why am I even talking about this if they don't actually want it to happen and they're just saying shit? I don't know. Great question. like and subscribe. So what do I think about this whole UBI thing? The boys over at one of my favorite podcasts, Seriously Wrong, coined a term that I really like. Universal guaranteed outcome, which is sort of similar to the irreducible minimum I was talking about in the Star Trek video. The state making sure that through any means necessary, all of our basic needs are fulfilled and then working up from there. So UBI could do this. It's a roundabout way of getting there within the capitalist system, and it could work if we did a bunch of other reforms to take away power from, you know, the 1% or whatever, and corporations. Or maybe we need to be striving for a different system entirely, one where random unelected losers and cucks can't decide the fate of billions of people, and maybe where they're not in charge, or maybe where money isn't needed to survive or meet our basic needs at all. Or perhaps a system where there is no giant apartment building with a penthouse on top, but instead, everyone just gets a nice little house. I think these guys' utopian future still has them at the top calling the shots, and the rest of us just sort of dealing with it. For me, the only utopian future I'm interested in is one where these morons aren't in charge. UBI is a great idea, but when it comes to the one these guys are pushing, I think we can do a lot better than this. What's up, everybody? It's me, Elizabeth Holmes, just letting you know you've reached the end of the video. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you for your blood. I'm just going to ask you to comment below. Do you think the billionaires actually want UBI? Do you want UBI? Or do you think there's a better system? And maybe subscribe if you want. Maybe go to my Patreon if you want. I will be trying to